to nobody.
Welcome back to Two Nobodies, everyone. Rupesh is back with you again. I've been able to talk about parenting, fatherhood in the past. We've talked about pregnancy loss, a lot of different issues that parents and mothers and dads face on a regular occasion. We've talked about loneliness. We've even touched on mental health a few times. I'm curious about this next topic. This is the mental health challenges that fathers face, particularly new dads. You know, we know about the challenges that people have had during the pandemic. So definitely have an interesting guest to talk to you to bring in today. Also, going to be folding in the Alberta election that's coming up. So what kind of guests can I bring in to talk about all these things? But MP Matt Jeneroux, he's the MP for Edmonton Riverbend. Matt, appreciate you making time for me on a Saturday. I know your schedule is precious, so I appreciate that time.
No, thanks, Rupesh. Really looking forward to it, and that's a wide range of topics, so can't wait to dive into them all.
Yeah. How long have you been an MP for?
I've been MP since October 2015, so I guess we're going on almost 8 years here, so just over 7. But I was elected to the provincial legislature before that, so my life has been turned upside down in politics for about the last 11 years now in representing kind of South Side Edmonton.
And how would you describe just life as a politician broadly, but I guess, you know, especially as a traveling MP, like what is that like as a politician right now?
Yeah, the most glamorous part is taking an Uber to the airport at 5 a.m. every Sunday, and then
Oh,
flying back every Friday. And I know a lot of MPs do that. They go back and forth to their constituencies, and you know, I think that's important. My family's a big reason why I did this job, or these two jobs, I guess, if you want to say that. And for me, it's about, you know, making sure we get back every week so I can see my family. But it's yeah, it's there's aspects of it that are a challenge, just from your time and the ability to spend the time with your family and whatnot. But it's, you know, it's a tremendous opportunity to influence public policy and bring forward ideas and
mm.
thoughts from the community that I grew up in to Parliament, and arguably one of the most important buildings in this country to raise those issues. So it's an honor that certainly isn't lost on me every time I walk through those doors.
You said you were a provincial MLA before, and then the shift to federal politics. What sort of what drove that shift for you?
Well, losing the election in 2015 did that.
Mm,
That was the official shift.
mm,
Yeah, it was elected provincially, and then did a term there, lost the election
mm,
in
mm,
2015, which was, I kind of thought, great, you know, whatever, tried politics, move on to something else. But then there was a lot of people reached out and phone calls saying, would you consider running federally? There's
mm.
the seat that I live in is coming up. The current MP had been there for about 16 years, and he was about to announce his retirement, and said, would you consider running? And I thought about it long and hard, and my wife at the time and I thought about it long and hard, and decided to make the jump. And yeah, I've been there since 2015.
In the first little while, like as you get used to traveling back and forth from a parenting perspective, like I don't know how old your kids are, but what was that like for you in terms of the challenges of traveling back and forth, trying to manage being an MP and then also being a dad?
Yeah, well, that is the biggest challenge, right? Like
Mm,
there's a bunch of political stuff that, you know, gets thrown at you, and whatever. I think over the course of 11 years now can handle most of that, if not all of it. But it's still the challenges with connecting with your family, right? So I have been blessed to have a three kids, two beautiful daughters, and a little boy, Hugh. So my girls are now in, one goes to Harry Ainley and one goes to Vernon Barford. So one's in grade 10 and one's in grade 9, and
mm,
then Hugh is yet to go to school. But I like to joke that over the course of the time, my girls used to come with me to every single event that I did as an MLA, and they'd kind of be, you know, in the back seat, and they'd be practicing, you know, all the questions that they'd get asked, which is usually like, "What's your name?" And they'd get, "My name's Molly," and "How old are you?" You know, "I'm 5." 5, and they go through kind of the cycle, almost mocking what's where we're going. But to now, we're trying to get them out to an event is an impossible feat. And certainly, I think at times when elections come around, they say,
Mm.
"Dad, don't put any signs in front of our school, okay? And like, don't door knock around our school." So of
Yeah,
course, the first place I go to door knock is around their school. Make sure we
yeah,
get a bunch of signs out there,
yeah, yeah.
just so they know. But yeah, no, it's been. I think from their perspective, it would be interesting. I've talked to a lot of people whose parents have been MPs and get kind of
Mm.
their sense of what my girls would be experiencing or have experienced up to this point. And there's a lot of opportunity, but also a lot of time where dad can't make it to a school event, or dad
Mm.
can't be there to drive on a Sunday afternoon to a
Yeah.
sporting event or something. So yeah, there's certainly drawbacks for a lot of it too.
How do you deal with those sort of situations when you're having to miss certain events? Like, what's the impact on you?
Yeah, it's hard. It's you keep kind of pushing forward, thinking, it's you're hopefully doing this job to make the country a better place, to make our community a better place. Have that as kind of the forefront in your mind. But ultimately, it's them who they stand on stage and they look out, and they're all the other kids' dads are there,
Mm.
and I'm not there. So it's we've had lots of chats about the quantity of time versus quality of time, and certainly put in the quality of time is what we try to maximize on. So instead of just kind of having a lazy morning around the house, it's let's go over to Hart's table for brunch, or
Mm.
something like that. Let's make sure that we're doing the things that they want to do, that we can do together. If it's at a playground when they're younger, it's making sure that we're really maximizing our time together, because I know we don't get as much of it as say most parents that of
Mm.
their friends and sort.
For teenage girls, is there a coolness factor with your job at all, or
It's super
definitely not?
uncool. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, super uncool. Yeah, no, it's I every time I've gone into their schools, they when they were in kindergarten, grade one, it was exciting, but now it's oh, Dad, do you have to come into the school again? And there's events in schools. There's they
Mm.
get to meet and chat with a variety of Edmontonians all the time. But their principals are important people in our community, and
Mm.
have a good connection with them and other teachers. And so they certainly don't. I don't think they appreciate it when I pop in on their schools and kind of
Yeah.
see them hanging out there in the halls. So yeah, it's I guess a quick response is very, very super uncool. That's how the job would be described by them. But yeah.
What about does politics enter the conversations at all, or are they curious about that?
Yeah, it's actually kind of fascinating lately that there's been certain issues that they've been raising, particularly
Mm.
Molly. She's in grade 10,
Mm.
and I follow their Instagram feeds and their
Mm.
Snapchat feeds
Mm.
and all that. And some of the time that she's been posting about like environmental policies and that,
Mm.
it's been kind of fascinating to see her perspective, which I think kind of has a bit of an impact on some of the things that the debates I then bring back to caucus, or
Mm.
to the House of Commons, because it's she's not a voter yet. She's
Mm.
15 years old, but she very well might likely be a voter in the next election. So
Mm.
that demographic of voters, that being important to them. I remember when I'm going to give a bit of an opinion here,
Yeah.
so I'll let you run with that as you will. But there was a decision made in the United States to rescind the abortion rights
Mm.
in about a year ago.
Mm.
To me, I thought that was the wrong decision. I've
Mm.
always been someone who's pledged myself as being very pro-choice,
Mm.
and making sure that to support people who are looking for abortion. But to see my, at the time, 14-year-old posting about that decision in the United States and how she disagreed with it was certainly something that I think she probably got from maybe some of the conversations we've had around
Mm.
the dinner table. Maybe it's watching some of the events unfold, and shaping how politically engaged she has been, or is, was certainly something that I was proud of her. I'd be proud of her, kind of regardless. But it was kind of interesting to see her weigh in and have
Mm.
an opinion and perspective at a young age like that.
Would you say kids her age are more like progressive thinking? And if so, I guess like as a conservative MP, how do you? I mean, you just described one issue in particular, but how do you kind of balance that? Like when these progressive kind of conversations are coming up, and if they're challenging sort of your thinking on things.
Yeah, well, I think I'm a progressive thinker too.
Mm,
I don't think, from my perspective, I've always found comfort in saying I'm fiscally conservative
mm,
and ensuring that there is strong metrics and guidelines for government spending and smaller
mm,
government, and all those things make a lot of sense to me. But I would think I'm very socially progressive, and I think my votes over time have shown that. I voted
mm,
with the Liberal government. At times, I voted against when I was a progressive conservative MLA in the legislature. Voted
mm,
against the government at times, and those are things that I think a lot of MPs or MLAs kind of struggle with on how where they kind of find themselves in that. I think where I was lucky enough to kind of find where my values kind of fit early in my career and have just kind of wrote those out. So from that perspective of where Molly's opinion was on as being someone who would support a pro-choice argument,
mm,
that was very much aligned with me. It was great. If she were to come out and say I don't think budgets need to be balanced, then I would maybe I would say, well, I might disagree, and here's some of the reasons. But again, it's entirely her opinion. She's welcome to when she does vote. If she doesn't want to vote for her dad, she's welcome to vote for someone else. I hope to
right.
convince her like I've convinced
Yeah.
other people to, but
Yeah.
it's sometimes those might be some of the harder chats, I guess, to convince people. But no, I think there's certain stigmas with all parties and all representatives and so on and
Mm,
so forth that I imagine they hear and they get caught up on. But I've certainly been open with them about my opinions, and when I vote against a party, sometimes it makes the news, sometimes it doesn't, and it's up to, I guess, them to kind of form their own opinions based on that. And yeah, and yeah, again, hope to earn their vote at least someday.
you raise an interesting point, which is you said the stigmas around certain parties. I think that it's very easy for people to box in all MPs of a certain party in a
Of
certain
course,
way of
yeah.
thinking. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like if you
Yeah.
you like I think here, in Riverbend, I've been here long enough that know know a certain number of people that I think I would give the impression that it's not just going to be I don't fit into the climate change isn't real mold. I
Mm,
don't fit into the pro-life mold. And
mm,
there's members of Conservative Party who
mm,
have those views. Um, and it's their opinion, and I think that's the beauty of Canada is that people can have those opinions and can disagree, but at the same time, there's certain elements that kind of bond you together. So yeah, and then from the Liberals, they're plagued with scandals and excessive spending. The NDP, get plagued with, the anti-oil sands and a party that would consistently, never balance a budget. So all of those things, you kind of you're branded by those, I guess,
mm,
almost extremes of each party. And if you don't kind of get to know the member of parliament or the MLA or the candidate, even for that matter, then of course, I think your opinion's going to kind of flow along with what the opinion of the party is. And it's kind of I guess, the downfall of our system, if you will, being the party system. But there's a lot of pros to it as well. And I think it's important that anyone who wants to be elected at anything, I think it's getting their own personal message out.
mm.
I'll use an example. Our election signs last election were I don't think I have one around here, but we're a different brand than the party's brand. Party's brand's always
Oh,
had a blue with
okay.
like a red stripe on it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, I went with a navy blue and like baby blue kind of look to it. It still said conservative on it, but it was consistent with everything else I've sent out to the community for the last 11 years has had this same kind of look on it. So why suddenly during the election like I thought it almost looked like I was pandering for a vote at that point by saying, oh hey, look, here's a whole different a
Mm,
brand new look of how I am. But then I go back to being kind of the person who sends out the newsletters and the
mm,
the magnets, hats, whatever else goes out there.
mm,
So we did that. We got some pushback from the party on it, but I think it was consistent with the community messaging that we've always had. Is that we're here for the community. We're elected to represent the community, and this is who I am, and been get that message out. Why would it change for the election time to go and get some goofy sign that the party wants you to use, as opposed to kind of some of that similar branding? So that's a small example, but I
yeah.
think ultimately something that I know other MPs do it. I'm not saying I'm the only MP, but I certainly wish a lot more people get to know kind of their local representative in that way, at least, then make judgment on you agree or disagree.
You're speaking to how you can be like just trying to be authentic in yourself, and
Yeah,
how do you like I think there's probably again a stigma or a brand that people associate with politicians about like that they're fake, that
yeah,
they're not always authentic, that they toe the party line. But I mean, you kind of gave an example of like how you're trying to stay true to your core beliefs and how you want to show up in the community the way you want to show up to the community. What would you say to people who feel like, nah, politicians are really not authentic people?
yeah. Yeah, well, it's probably a fair argument to make. There's certainly been times where, I've, over the course of 11 years, like it hasn't been perfect. Like
Mm,
I think, the over time you kind of find these sorts of things that are important, and authenticity and being genuine are things to me that I've always valued. So why would
mm,
I go into politics to go and say, well, here's a whole bunch of messaging I'm going to send out on Twitter that's a party message on something that I probably don't have a ton of knowledge on. So anyway,
mm,
so I think from that perspective, it's allowed you to be a bit or it's allowed me at least to be a bit more comfortable with myself and debate issues that matter to me, and bring forward ideas that matter to me. I think technology. When I was first elected, my nomination, I was elected in 2011. So Twitter was I joined Twitter in 2008. Or that's what
mm,
Twitter tells me. I joined Twitter in 2008, and I remember at the time thinking this was great. Like, you're branded by this party, like you're
mm.
going to get voted in some form or another based on your leader and party, and
Yeah.
then the third, likely, at the time I was 29, some young punk is going to come and maybe win the election here. But I thought there's a real opportunity with when Twitter came out, can really share like who I am and the thoughts that I think are important. And at the time, it was building schools in Southwest Edmonton, and that really
Mm,
wasn't part of the party platform,
mm,
but it was something that I thought, this is great. I'm going to say I'm going to go to the legislature and fight for schools in Southwest Edmonton, and we got a bunch built, and I think largely because we put on some pressure in a way that wasn't necessarily the party kind of top down. This is what will you need to go and say at your debates and at the
mm.
doors and whatever. So I think saw value in that very early on, and I think my generation of elected officials have been able to use that technology in a way that kind of share that. I'm now off Twitter, like, well, I guess I'm not off it. I technically have it, but it's no longer on my phone
Mm.
or anything else. It's I despise the thing, but Instagram, I find Instagram's a great way to communicate
Yeah.
a two-way kind of dialogue with people in the community, and share ideas that I think are important, and also hear ideas that people think are important in our community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, when it comes to like the if I guess I don't know how to frame this, but do you think that kids are pretty much off limits when it comes to politicians? Like, is that understood throughout the House of Commons that when it comes to political attacks, like you just don't go after families, or do you
Yeah.
think that there's kind of an increasing nastiness now with politics? Like, is that
Yeah.
because I mean sometimes you hear like people talking about the prime minister's family
Yeah.
or all these sort of things, and to me it's just not necessary. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's I certainly agree that the nastiness is it's just gone one direction since I've been
Mm,
elected. And the division in the country too, and we're seeing that in the provincial election now. When I ran in the 2012 provincial election, there was the Wild Rose Party, the Progressive Conservative Party, the Liberals, the NDP,
Mm-hmm.
an Alberta Party, and probably an independent or two that ran against. Now you're pretty much the UCP or the NDP, and there
Right.
seems to be zero room in the middle, if you will. So that's not to go not too down take us off track with that particular aspect, but I think the that's a major issue with politics and I think right now, and it's not just in Alberta,
Mm.
it's in the United States. You're the Republican, you're Democrat. There's a very black and white system. I before we get to kind of your kids question, I think it's very driven a lot by how quickly the news cycle uses. You generally, I think most people watch the first or second story in the
Mm.
6 o'clock news, and they're busy with dinner, spending time with their family, going off to a sporting event. It's very much get that quick information and then move on. And then also in the social media feed, you're kind of scrolling through, and you see
Absolutely.
a headline and you're like,
Yeah.
oh wow, like I heard this, and is there something underneath that headline that's maybe more or equally as important? So I think that the way that we consume kind of news and information now has driven that kind of quick,
Mm.
like, is it black or is it white kind
Mm.
of mental. Not a lot of room in that gray zone. So I think that's really that's what I'm don't like and fearful for kind of where we're heading with that kind of
Mm.
politics and that kind of country, to be frank. Yeah, when it comes to kids, yeah, that's like, because our lives are so public now, like I rarely share pictures of any of my kids on
Yeah.
social media. It's something that they're in most a lot of ways, like, they don't want me to.
Mm.
I guess it would benefit me to be able to go and share a family dinner or something like that, because you're sharing kind of that authentic side. But I think there's a lot of reasons also not to, and made the decision that it's not like I don't, but I really keep it limited. We had an incident when I was elected as an MLA that Molly was in grade I think Molly was in grade 1 and Lily was in kindergarten. They went over
Mm.
to GPN, George P. Nicholson School in Twin Brooks, and we had a threat from somebody called my office asking
Mm.
about some labor negotiations that were going on, actually similar to like a strike incident now. And there was a fine conversation. We were getting along. I didn't know the guy, but he was just kind of this. And then after kind of the conversation was done, he's like, okay. He's like, well, I hope you vote against it, and if not, certainly know where your kids go to school. And I think he kind of said it in like a joking way. But quickly hang up the phone. You call the sergeant at arms and ask, is there things that I can do? And they put a car outside of Molly's school
Mm.
at the time, and for a number of weeks, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks, Molly had to be escorted out of her classroom. She couldn't go out by herself just to go to like her backpack or something like that. She had to go out with her teacher, and whatever the principal was notified. So those sorts of things, like it is a scary part of what
Yeah.
this public job is. And there's lots of people who have had, the more specific death threats against them and their family. And, the prime minister gets it, I'm sure, regularly. I remember when Andrew Scheer was our leader, his kids constantly got barraged by it. I know our current leader, Pierre Poilievre, has had a number of death threats of his wife and kids. And, it's I think it does. It's a scary part of public life. Um, but it's also, if nobody does these jobs, too, then you're kind of left with, you're if nobody who has a kid is going to do is going to run for politics, then
Mm.
I don't think you're kind of missing out on a major component
Mm.
of, like, young dads, like, young moms that
Mm.
I think have something to bring to the table all the time. So.
I mean, you can look at this from a black and white perspective and just say, like, it's absolutely unacceptable, like that, these kind of threats happen, or that there's, potential violence against political officials. Is there anything like, is there a just not, I don't want to say justification, but do you think what's driving, I guess, this amped up language from the public and this aggressiveness. Like, what do you think is like these days? Like, you hear more and more about it. Like Chrystia Freeling getting harassed in Alberta when she came
Yeah.
here. Like, I know, like across the spectrum, that was denounced. But like, yeah, you see these incidents happen more and more. Is there any thoughts about what's maybe driving this right now?
Yeah, I don't know if I have all the answers to that.
Yeah.
I have my own opinions on it. I'll be sure those. I think kind of getting back to the social media, the 120 characters that you can get a message out there. Maybe not having all the information all the time is
Mm,
probably, a factor for people quickly informing their decisions. I know during COVID there was a lot of, from my perspective, I decided to get vaccinated. For me, it was important for me and my family.
mm,
We decided this was we wanted to do. It was our decision. But the amount of people that were messaging me saying, "How dare you force me to get vaccinated?" Like I wasn't forcing anybody to get vaccinated. There's governments, arguably, if you want to look at that, to forcing people to do certain things in certain ways. I think there was just a lot of anger, during COVID too,
mm,
that towards government, towards elected officials, or not. Like, I think of people like Dr. Hinshaw. There's a lot of anger towards people like that
mm,
that really. Uh, Instead of looking at the experts, which I would argue Dr. Hinshaw is an expert, and
mm,
she's a medically trained doctor, and understanding science and whatnot, in lieu of not wanting to do maybe some of the decisions that she put in place, there was a real pushback, and, well, let's go down and find our own evidence for this. And then you start seeing the social media spiral of, well, I saw
mm,
this article on Facebook, and this article says, I should be doing this instead. So how dare she tells me I shouldn't be doing this? And
mm.
the whole mask debate. I remember at the beginning, I was a party health critic at the beginning of the pandemic, and that the masks were like a hot thing, right? Like, there
Yeah,
was
yeah,
some public health officers saying it doesn't impact you at
yep.
all, so don't worry about it. And
I
some were
remember
like,
that.
no, you have to wear them, like, outside and
Yep,
everywhere. So then like, who do you trust at that point? Like,
yep,
certainly can't trust politicians, because
mm,
they have their motives
mm,
around. So, well, can you trust doctors? Well, all doctors are disagreeing. So I think you go down some of these paths of, you think, well, I know better than you now, because I've gone and I've done
mm,
this research, and you tried to force me to do this. So I think COVID also really helps. So the social media technology piece, where
mm,
everybody's kind of accessible now, and then on top of that, kind of COVID happened. I think the incident with Krisha was a terrible incident, and yeah, we all condemned it. I think, like, elements of both of those factors were at play when just using that as an example.
yeah. Very interesting. You started the Hi Dad Foundation not too long
Yeah.
ago. Why? What were you feel like?
Yeah.
What did you feel like was missing?
Yeah, well, I'll back up a little bit and tell you kind of my story on why. This High Dad Foundation is basically accumulation of 7 years of doing the Father's Day on the Hill event, which is an
Mm,
annual event we do on Parliament. So I started Father's Day on the Hill. Um, it was initially, I was going to do it at the legislature, but then when I lost the election, I was like,
mm,
well, I guess we'll just do it in Parliament Hill. So anyway, that worked out. But no, it was when I had Lily. She's now 14 years old, so 14
mm,
years ago, had Lily. She's 15 months younger than Molly, and at the time was married to the girl's mom, and we had one little a baby at home, and then Lily came along, and when Lily came along, it felt there was just a lot of pressure on like our relationship. We ended up getting divorced. We're
mm,
friends now, and everything, but ended up getting divorced at the time. But there was a lot of postpartum on the girl's mom's
mm,
side, but then also from the dad's perspective. I remember going for a beer with one of my friends at the time, saying, what, like, this is really kind of tough to deal with. Like, you got two kids, trying to manage the future together. Our relationship is deteriorating, but then also on top of that, their mom's suffering from postpartum. So
mm,
from my perspective, and then I remember him telling me, he's like, he's like, dude, you got to like suck it up and like, move
Mm.
on. This is like, like she's the one that's gone through this whole,
Right. What are you
change.
complaining about?
Exactly.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
and I thought like, well, I don't want to take away from that. Like, I don't think like that's not my intent at the time was to vent and complain
Mm.
about, well, I want to kind of minimize that. Like it was the opposite. I thought that's a major issue that's facing our family, that's impacting, our future together. But then there's also this other component over here that's kind of being, ignored, and what, kind of dads are going through, and major life changes
Yeah.
and sorts. So and then he wasn't the only guy. I talked to a few other guys after that, and same kind of message was, like you better just kind of, pull up your socks and, get through it. So I thought, there's got to be like some resources out there. There's got to be something that can do that,
Mm.
dads like myself can go and talk to. And there were kind of some. There was, the different mental health associations. I won't name them, but they would have, a little paragraph about, men suffering from anxiety or depression, and
Mm.
call this number, and great, there's like a 3 month wait to kind of someone to talk to you. I'm like, okay, well, this doesn't really help. So
Yeah.
I thought, the thing that could do is have people raising awareness, people in positions where they have a voice, where they
Mm.
have a opportunity to share kind of their personal story, raising that awareness. So I wasn't elected at the time, but then
Mm.
ended up getting elected to the legislature and talked
Mm.
with some of the mental health experts and saying, this is kind of like a missing component. And at the time, it was people were like, oh yeah, you are kind of right. There is a missing component
Mm.
there with dads. So started looking at some public policy stuff that we could do, and thought, there's that there, which we're doing, and we are doing, we're still doing. But there's also the aspect of just being able to stand up in the House of Commons and the legislature and say
Mm.
like, listen, I suffered from anxiety, depression, and it's okay to talk about it. Like go and if reach out to anybody, somebody, anybody. Like it's there's a stat that it's 50 men a week in Canada commit suicide. Like
Wow.
that's insane. Like,
Wow.
75% of suicides in Canada are men. Like it's
Mm.
like these numbers are staggering, and it's through COVID it's only going up. So if everyone's there suffering in silence, like that to me is a major problem facing our country. So anyway, so yeah, so we condense the long story short, we started Father's Day in the Hill to raise awareness. I guess 7 years ago now, and maybe five, maybe I'm even being generous, maybe three MPs showed up to it, and we were kind of talking to a room of stakeholders who all agreed, and three MPs like, okay, yeah, this is all right. We had our event last year,
Mm.
and as part of our event last year, we had it was 150 MPs showed up
Wow.
to it, and not, the MPs aren't we have to get all the MPs there is kind of that's
Mm.
not really the intent of it, but it's the amount of now media that show up, the amount
Yeah.
of discussion that's happening in Parliament at committees and everything, because trying to raise the awareness that it's okay to talk about it. And I have MPs from all parties that come and are co-sponsors of the event, so we can do it. The speaker comes. We had celebrity Brian Balmer came last year.
Mm.
This year we have an exciting guy. He's a first responder who's suffered. He does a bunch of speaking tours. He's going to come and speak to it. A bunch of hockey players have reached out and said, "Yeah, this is
Mm.
great. Like, I want to support this." So, anyways, all of that kind of say from the Father's Day in the Hill event is something that I going to keep doing, and it raises awareness in Parliament Hill, and it's great. But yeah, so and sorry, your question was about High Dad Foundation. So High Dad Fund. So last year we announced the creation of High Dad Foundation,
Mm.
which it's the High Dad is basically the message on Father's Day that you kind of reach out and if it's over text, or if it's calling up your dad and just saying, hi dad, like how you doing, like
As a
that
check-in.
yeah, and like
Yeah.
it's just as simple as that. And if
Yeah.
if your dad says, actually, I've had some pretty tough days. Like, all right, Dad. Well, hey, let's go for a beer. Let's go for a walk in the
Mm.
park. Let's go and watch a Oilers game, or something like
Mm.
that together. I think that's the ultimate intent, is like having that, starting those conversations with people. So the High Dad Foundation is basically there's three pillars to the High Dad Foundation. There's the event component, which is
Mm.
Father's Day in the Hill, and that's kind of now under the High Dad Foundation running, as opposed to just off the corner of my desk as an MP. And then there's the the generating the resources for going out into different aspects of male-dominated workforces. So construction companies,
Mm,
universities. You see a lot of men in business and engineering at universities that are committing suicide because they've given up in a lot of ways. So getting speakers and resources out to them is a big component of it. And then the third pillar is the public policy and research, where
mm,
right now, the statistics that to kind of rattled off are some that are well known throughout the mental health community, but diving into some of those specific reasons as to why there's a high rate of lawyers and male tax accountants committing suicide. Those are the certain things we want to get to the bottom of, which will
yeah.
then inform public policy, which will then inform advocacy to push elected leaders like myself to come and push for ideas for change. And that's ultimately the circle that High Dad's operating with.
I want to hear more about the public policy front, but before that, what do you think, or what kind of stigmas do you think are holding men back from opening up about their mental health? I mean, you talked earlier about like just that need that it's kind of a myth now, I would say, but just suck it up, right? Be
Yeah.
strong, that sort of thing. But what other kind of stigmas or things are in play right now that are preventing dads from opening up?
Yeah, well, I think that's that's a big one, right? It's the you're supposed to be the leader in the family, and
Yeah,
you can't show kind of any weakness.
right.
It it's not right. It's think about everybody else in the family and so on and so forth. So I think whether it's through organized sport, whether it's through the just the general, I guess, kind of machoism
Mm,
mental that men have been facing for I guess since the beginning of time,
mm-hmm,
that it's hard to go and have those chats. There's
mm,
people reach out to me, I don't know if it's regularly. Maybe it's more or less than other people get reached out to, but it's when people reach out, it's usually like, hey, I just like want to chat, or maybe it's that friend you haven't heard from in a while that like reaches out and says like,
mm,
hey, you want to go grab a beer, and think like, yeah, well, yeah, I haven't heard from him in a while. Like, I wonder, if he's doing okay, right? So,
right,
so
right.
I think there's just like that, and then also like all of our lives are much busier now too, right? So
Mm,
that time to go and like take to have I keep saying have a beer. Maybe that's not the best alternative, but go and sit down at an Oilers game together. Like, it's yeah, but we got all this other stuff going on. So I think you kind of get in this rat race of our careers and lives, and it just kind of pulls you in. So there's that stigma piece, but then there's also that just busyness component, that
mm,
how you can take the time for yourself, and also kind of talk to somebody else about it. And I think people also worry that maybe there's a component of I go and I talk to a friend, and suddenly they're going to say I need to go and do something that I'm not necessarily comfortable doing yet, or whatever. So I don't know. It's certainly changed though. Like, I've found since I stood up in the legislation in 2012 and said the first speech I said, and the amount of like emails I got just from people in the community who were like, come on, man, like that's not what we sent you there to talk about. Like,
interesting.
it's going, there's a major deficit, or I forget what the issue of the
Mm,
day was or whatever.
mm,
That's what we need to talk about. I'm like, well, I can kind of do two things, guys, but
yeah.
sure. But ultimately, it's now I find there's a lot more, like, I reference a number of MPs, but there's a lot more people who are paying attention to it, and the numbers are still astronomical in terms of suicides and preventions and whatnot. But it's not the I think people are okay, more okay to talk about it than it's really ever been.
Yeah, and you even see like governments organizing themselves to have, dedicated departments
Yeah,
towards mental health and
100%.
addictions and such. So that's definitely a shift. I also feel like, I don't know about you, but it feels like there's more to being a parent these days than it was maybe back in the day. Like parents understand you need to be present. You need to be emotionally in tune with your kids, right? Like there's a lot more. So it almost feels like the pressure on dads is even more so. And if you can't open up and you kind of have that old masculine mentality, you're putting yourself in a pretty difficult position because now you're being asked to do even more.
Yeah, and gone are the days of, dad grabbing his suitcase on
Yeah.
Monday morning and, getting in a station wagon and
It's
driving
not good
away.
enough anymore,
And yeah,
right?
that's right.
Yeah.
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 And, now we have more technology too. Like, we started the chat about referencing, how much I'm away.
Mm.
But I think about the guys who were members of parliament, and largely men who were members of parliament, back in the 50s or whatever. They would take the train, and they would, like, January, they would take the train to Ottawa, and they
Yeah.
would
Wow.
they would stay there until June, right? They wouldn't necessarily come back every weekend, and there was no, like, we didn't have phones like
Mm-hmm.
FaceTime, or anything. There was no pictures being sent. It was all like handwritten letters back home,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think now there's a tremendous opportunity for, I FaceTime my girls,
Mm-hmm.
not as regularly as I'd like, but
Mm-hmm.
I FaceTime them. But my little guy FaceTime, almost every couple days is what,
Mm-hmm.
we're on the phone together, and
Yeah.
it's kind of that, I guess there's that expectation from society, but I think there's also that desire, because when I'm sitting in the House of Commons at like 8 p.m., and he's messaging me to, like, FaceTime, I'd much rather be doing that than,
100%.
sitting in
Yeah.
the Commons. And so I
Yeah.
think now dads have had that, they've been able to see that, hey, like look what he's doing, like what a cool little guy he is, like I want to kind
Mm-hmm.
of get to know him,
Mm-hmm.
and spend time with him, and whatever. So I think that's, it's probably gone both ways on that front, and I like it's a good thing. I think it's just making sure that, when dads are facing those kind of pressures for, maybe for whatever reason, they haven't been able to FaceTime for a week, and dad's kind of feeling depressed or anxious about
Mm-hmm.
things, then those are kind of the times, reach out and say, hey, like, let's have a chat, how you doing, or whatever. I think goes a long way.
Yeah. What do you think are the effects of mental health struggles from men on the emotional well-being of their kids?
Yeah. Well, so I'm not an expert on mental health. I just,
Yeah, yeah, no, that's okay. I
I
just
just
your
I just
thoughts, I
push
guess.
the
Yeah, that's
ideas
okay.
forward.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, like, it's I find it just, looking at what, the pressures that particularly my daughters go through in
Mm,
high school and junior high, like, I don't know how I would have been able to handle those pressures.
yeah.
And you think about, how much they're, like, sure, bullying, like that's a thing, but there's also just a lot of societal pressure on, like now more, how to look, like,
Mm,
how to dress, like,
mm-hmm.
did you sharing, not sharing stuff social media, like, it's
Mm,
just, there's so much to that to unpack, that I would just find it, probably, like, absolutely terrifying to be a teenage girl in their shoes, going to high school these days. There's the, like, hormones are changing, and all
yeah.
that, as well. And I guess as a parent, you my parenting perspective, which, it doesn't have to be everybody's perspective, is to kind of let them be their own person, give them that
Mm,
kind of freedom to do it. And then, when they need or want something, that, it's not just money, because that happens a lot, but when they need or want something, it's you're there for them. They know that there's somebody that they can talk to absolutely all the time, anytime. And it's a from you kind of almost, like, send them off into, like, the wild, and just kind of, hope that everything, goes well a lot of the time. And I don't know if that's, maybe for men, maybe it's something that, it was, predominantly in, like, the 40s and 50s. It was something, well, the mom kind of took care of all that kind of stuff,
mm,
so that wasn't something, maybe the dad had to worry about. But it's certainly something that I get very involved in, and very, I guess, concerned, and think about a whole heck of a lot on what, society's, done or doing to kids these days.
I have a 5-year-old daughter, and I'm excited for, obviously, as she grows up and seeing what
Yeah,
kind of challenges she has to face and helping her navigate through that. But I'm not gonna lie, I am scared about
yeah, right.
what that's gonna look like,
Yeah.
having raising two teenage daughters.
Mm,
Um, I don't know. What do you
yeah.
what do you think are, like, what are the challenges that they face that are very different from kids in the past. And I guess I
Mm.
don't know, any suggestions for as my daughter grows up.
Man, yeah, yeah. I again, like I am no expert on parenting, that's for sure. But I think like the I like to joke with the girls that being in Ottawa gives me tremendous access to the parliamentary precinct security, but also the RCMP. We have a lot of
Mm,
connections to the RCMP. So if there's ever some time that girls, I need to make sure that the RCMP is just doing a drive-by of some boy's house that's been very rude to you or mean to you, it's certainly happened to arrange that. And we don't have those capabilities, but I like to at
yeah,
least pretend to them that
yeah,
do.
yeah.
Um, but no, it's they from as like a parent, like it's they've changed a lot
Mm,
in kind of how like who they are, and I love who they are. I think it's very cool, all of their interests. Like it's really
mm,
neat to kind of see them grow, and they're very different, even though they're so similar in ages and everything. But it's allowing them to kind of do that is it's a hard part because like for example, I hope Molly doesn't watch this, but Molly pierced her nose just over Christmas, and
mm,
she was telling her mom, she's like, yeah, I'm nervous about what dad's gonna say. And it wouldn't be my I don't know, I guess my preferred thing that she
mm,
did, but
mm,
knowing that my reaction is going to very much
mm,
drive kind of those future conversations about what she's going to share or not share with me,
mm.
was very important. So
Yeah.
it's I guess the reaction could have been, why did you do that? You shouldn't have done that. It looks, whatever. Nose piercings aren't something that I like or whatever. Take it out, or I don't know, like
Right.
whatever the reaction. It could have been that, but I think it was like it really took everything inside me to recognize it, but not make like a huge deal out of it, not make it be a big thing that would then I think impact future decisions,
You
because
could have
that's
lost her a little bit, right?
for sure, yeah. Like
Yeah.
the minor thing is that she has a hole in her nose. Like it's not not the end of the world, but
Yeah.
maybe the next one is, right. Maybe the next time that she wants to reach out is, and thinking, well, geez, every time I reach out to dad, he's goes and blows a gasket. So
Mm,
I'm just not going to reach out to him anymore. So anyway, that's again, that's my perspective. I don't know if it's the best or worst. I'm sure there's experts
mm.
that'll tell you one way or the other, but from my perspective, it's certainly something that you kind of almost have to meet them on their timeline right now and let them kind of drive a lot of that and be available for them, because they're growing to be independent, right? They're learning to be
Yeah.
to what it takes to eventually live on their own and do sorts of things, and they love it, and they love to be able to go and buy a Starbucks, and the adultness of it all, I'm
Yeah.
sure is fascinating to them. But if they don't learn that, then I guess you'd have to worry about what happens when they do eventually, leave for whether it's university or a job or whatever.
Well, they're at the age where boys are could be in the picture, right? Like, how are you
Yeah,
feeling about that? Like, is there this protective? I imagine there
yeah,
would be. I
yeah,
felt that way as soon as like soon after my daughter was born. I'm like, no
yeah,
guy's ever going to be good enough for her, kind of
yeah,
mentality.
right.
But I don't
Yeah,
know, how are you feeling as your girls are kind of getting to that age?
yeah. It's and you see how like them interacting with their friends, and it's I think like again, doing this job maybe for 11 years has taught me something about judging character maybe,
Mm,
and kind of understanding motives maybe a little bit more
mm,
than it would if I hadn't have done this job. So there's certainly sometimes where I see like, okay, like this this guy here, there's I was also a teenage boy at one point. I
mm,
I kind of get what looking for, but I don't know, like it's sure, like there's times I'd love to maybe trip them as they're walking in the hall, but ultimately it probably also drives my girls away, right? So
yeah.
it's yeah, it's I don't know, it's for both of them, I worry that it's going to be an experience that there's only kind of one way to experience. love and then loss, right? And I would love to protect them and say, okay, here's a perfect prince for you,
Mm,
and now go away and live a wonderful life together. But I suspect, a big part of what's probably they're going to learn is, I think most people do, is, learn that they they love somebody, then they end up out of love with somebody, and yeah, it's I know. I guess kind of have to almost just let them be themselves, and or at least that's my opinion. Let them be themselves,
yeah.
and hope that things work out in the end. Probably wouldn't make every decision that I would make, but ultimately, like nose piercing. But it is what it is, and I guess yeah, hopefully they turn into good. Well, they are good humans now, and I hope that they
Mm.
they remain good humans as they get older and into their careers and lives by themselves.
I know you said that you're not an expert in all this, but I think there's so much value in people hearing, their local politician or just politicians in general really reflect very openly and honestly about
Mm.
their struggles, and I think that that goes a long way for people. So, I appreciate the humility, but I think there's so much value in what you're saying. So, thank you for sharing all those pieces. With the High Dad Foundation and the public policy piece, how do you feel like we're doing? I mean, there's the role of the federal government, obviously, in supporting mental health and addictions, and obviously the provinces have ultimate jurisdiction in terms of delivering healthcare. This is a pretty broad question, Matt, but how do you think we're doing in terms of supporting mental health and addictions, maybe particularly with men and fathers, I guess?
Yeah. Um, I think the so I we're it's made like a massive jump forward in terms of the awareness of it. Like I think again, if you look at kind of the three pillars of High Dad, just as an example, a major pillar of High Dad is the awareness. It's
Mm,
men talking about it. It's not just on the men's mental health. It's just mental health. In general, being a conversation that people are comfortable having. The with the what I see, I guess, with the major component that's missing in a lot of ways is that you can go and you can put these kind of public facing, optically looking things that say, hey, we support mental health, we support addictions, we
mm,
support kind of this general direction. But then it's what are you doing kind of behind the scenes, and that's that's where politicians and I think politics gets in trouble, gets in the way a lot of the time,
mm,
because it's very easy to go and stand up and say, hey, we have a minister of mental health, but that minister of mental health now kind of has to like get out of the way because a health minister is doing the job, right? So
mm,
it's it's how much of that is serious to that continues on. And at the federal level, I it's no secret I've been critical of the current government for they made as part of the this current government's party platform, they made a big push, and as all parties did, for mental health funding. They've announced a big chunk of it. um, it's that would have been back what 2021. We're now at 2023, and that funding hasn't shown up anywhere.
mm,
So they'll argue, well, it's coming and it's a 4-year mandate and all these things to kind of get that money out the door. But like one example is the suicide prevention hotline number, like 998. Like it was, we had the minister of addictions and mental health before committee, and one member asked her, can you tell me the suicide hotline number? And she's like, oh, you mean 998? And he's like, no. He's like, tell me like the current number. Like she had to look at officials, and there's somebody in the back of the room that had to come up and run up and put a
mm,
paper in front of her. This is the number. Like she didn't know what the number was, and I think that was a big statement. Like it's a political kind of thing to do, but it's
mm,
a big statement in that you can go and you can say you support mental health, you can go and you can say that you're putting a bunch of stuff behind it, but until it's there, like it's kind of that you know the illusion just isn't really enough anymore. So
mm,
we've made big leaps, and we've got these ministers and departments and whatever, and the provincial government. I'm not just picking on the liberals here. The
mm,
provincial government has a minister of mental health
mm,
as well, and it's about, okay, great, well, now let's ensure that that funding's going to the right places, because ultimately it's the if you use the suicide hotline number, like it's still not in place. It was part of this, it's announced as part of this last budget that'll come in place in November, but we've heard this before, so it's I guess the skeptic in me is like, okay, well then come on then, if we do support this mental health support, then actually support it, instead of just getting past that awareness piece and into the actual public policy piece.
Is there anything in particular, like any particular policies or actions that you're hoping that occur or move forward?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of things that really, yeah, I guess excite me about kind of the what we've been able to do with High Dad, and
Mm,
it's in the men's mental health space. It's the diving into the root causes of suicide
mm,
and of men is putting a lot of resources into that type of research. The Canadian Mental Health Association, Mental Health Commission of Canada, the Movember, they do stuff with men's mental health, and
mm,
it's very good stuff, but they also do so much other stuff, right? So
mm,
having that dedicated men's mental health arm, if you will, is something that I found was lacking. So being able to look at some of that, those issues, largely with suicide, is because just the staggering numbers is a big push that we have. The one public policy thing that comes to mind that still, like, to this day, I can't wrap my head around why we don't do it, is every time a baby's born in Alberta, there's a home care nurse goes and visits
mm,
the new baby and the mom and the family, and
mm-hmm.
there's a whole bunch of reasons why. Like, they're inside the house, they're talking about, okay, like, do you have any questions, breastfeeding and so on and so forth.
Right.
But they always, like, the last question that they ask is, it's like, okay, well, like, how are you feeling? Like, is there
Mm,
basically they're looking for any signs, like, are you thinking about harming yourself, harming the baby,
mm,
postpartum? Like, they're this is usually within 2 to 3 days after the baby's
mm,
born, and they ask the question and whatnot, but rarely do they turn or if at all do they turn to the other parent and say,
mm.
hey, like, how are you doing? Like, that to me seems like a simple, like, within a checklist kind of
Sure.
box that AHS probably sends out to every
Mm,
home care nurse and says, okay, now turn to, in like our case, a dad, but there's lots of other couples where it's the other
mm,
parent, and ask them how they're doing, and
yeah.
that just doesn't happen. And those sorts of small things, we can raise awareness for it and whatnot, but getting that changed in public policy or regulation or wherever the heck it sits, making sure that people are looking at those little examples and saying, that should change. Like, we should ask the
Mm-hmm.
dad if he's feeling okay, because if he's not, there's a whole bunch of places we could send him to now. And like those associations mentioned, also High Dad Foundation, we want to be able to have all those resources for dads too. So ultimately, I think that's the I kind of got again to the reasons for High Dad and kind of went off on a tangent, but I think that's those sorts of things I think we can change if we kind of do it right.
That would be, imagine how supportive dads or parents would feel if they knew that the system was actually checking in on them, right? Like the
Totally
system
right.
actually kind of cared and it was more proactive rather than people having to go seek help. Like that's
Yeah.
huge. I have a friend who just came to visit us from Germany. She just moved from Alberta to Germany, and she was saying how over there the system checks in on you. Like if you don't go
Yeah.
to your appointments, they will actually like send you a notification. I mean,
Well, yeah.
some people might feel like that could be a little intrusive, but I mean, I think
Yeah.
the premise of it in terms of just showing that the system wants to make sure that you're doing okay.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty neat. I think that
Like,
goes
we
along.
already kind of do it, right? Like, there's already a home care nurse showing up,
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah,
it's simple, like another simple question to say, like,
yeah,
hey, and
absolutely.
so
Yeah,
anyway, it's yeah, I completely agree. Like, if there was some more of that system kind of intertwined to that patient, as opposed to probably checking some box somewhere that, okay, there's another one done, and move on, right? So
yeah. Are you okay if we shift to what's going on here in Alberta with this election coming up?
yeah, what's going on? Yeah, sure.
It's interesting because I mean I would say like a few years ago I saw some I don't know if it was a study or a headline or whatever it was, but that people were leaving Alberta. The young people were kind of leaving in droves because they were worried about the future of Alberta, and you're seeing this in Calgary in particular, and now you're seeing, I don't know if it's the affordability issue or Alberta is just an attractive place to live. You're seeing all this migration of all these young people coming back to Alberta. So I don't know. It's an interesting time, but I'm curious about like the future of Alberta. I worry about the future of Alberta personally. But this election, May 29th, coming in for the provincial government, what do you think matters? What do you think should matter for people? Why should people care about this election?
Yeah, well, I think you hit the nail on the head. The affordability piece to, I think, so many Albertans right now, and in our community here in Riverbend, it's, you know, the it, because like say Edmonton's house prices have skirted the, I guess, the incredible spikes you're seeing in places like Vancouver and Toronto and
Mm,
Burlington and all
mm,
across pockets of Canada. It's become attractive in that way. um and it's going to mean right now a lot of people considering, Edmonton, Calgary, other
mm,
parts of Alberta. So sure, there's likely to that influx will probably continue. Like, that's my opinion. But drive, like, to your question about like why this election matters is that there's there's pretty, yeah, it's again like a divisive set of ideas on
mm,
how to continue on this path, or how to fix, other aspects. And it's not just this. I know there's a big debate on healthcare and
mm,
whatnot happening too. So from my perspective, this one's really going to be, you kind of will set that 4-year stage. And we don't have minority governments in Alberta. There's only two parties now, so
mm,
it's going to be locked in for 4 years, regardless which direction it goes.
mm,
And on whatever side of the political spectrum you find yourself on, that could be great, or it could be scary. And there's a real movement in politics to not vote for something, but to vote against something.
mm,
And that's it's not new, I guess, but it's certainly, you're seeing a lot of that in this election. I think the people that are not New Democrat supporters are like, I cannot vote. I'll vote for anybody but Rachel Notley.
mm,
People who aren't conservative supporters say, "Oh, I'll vote for anybody but Danielle Smith," and they've
mm,
become these divisive people in the respective camps who are voting against them. So I think, either way, we're going to get there's going to be a segment of the population which looks like, probably at this point, like it's pretty dead heat, judging by
mm,
the polls, the 50 up to probably about 50% of the population voting and being upset against one or the other, right? So it's it's going to, again, that whatever happens in that election, whoever comes out as the premier, I think is going to have a whole heck of a lot of work to bring back and try to
mm.
unify Albertans, because it's gotten so toxic in a way that, it's just, yeah, it's, you say you're fearful for Alberta. I think all politicians should provide some aspect of hope, or else they should get out of their jobs. So
Mm.
I'm not necessarily fearful, but I certainly know there's a whole heck of a lot of work ahead that need to do, again, regardless on who wins on May 29th.
You said something interesting, which is people are tending to vote or thinking about who they should vote against rather than something for. I'm noticing, I even feel this at the federal level, Matt, but
Mm,
that leaders are not articulating what the future vision is for
mm,
like how to move forward. It's always about like what the other person is doing wrong, right?
mm,
And so it really, I think,
yeah.
pushes people to again vote against somebody rather than for. Like, I think I'm seeing that right now in the current, the campaigns haven't officially started, but it's a lot of like, this is why Rachel Notley is bad, or this is why Danielle Smith's bad. It's not, here's what my vision is for
Yeah.
Alberta going forward, and I think it just further pushes people into that, into those two sides.
Yeah.
But why is that? Is that a conscious strategy? Would you say is to really campaign against why that person is not good versus then campaigning for, hey, what that vision is that I have for either the country or the province?
Yeah, I think it's an easy strategy, right? Like, it's, instead of going and coming up with, like, say you and I were sitting down for let's use coffee this time. Sitting down for coffee, and we're talking about the election. Say, what do you want to see in the election? It's much easier for you to say, well, man, I'd love to get rid of Trudeau, right? And
Mm,
I hear that all the time. It's not like, okay, I want to see an expansion of infrastructure dollars. I want to see the defense spending go up to 2%. I want to see the whatever it is, the healthcare transfers,
mm,
kind of different, whatever. It's You don't have to think about the issues, right? It's
mm,
about almost like the politics of personality has become more and more. Maybe that's a downside of being accessible to more people with technology, is that people now form these opinions of, well, I despise Danielle Smith, I despise Rachel Notley, right?
mm,
It's turned into a, okay, but like, why do you despise them is probably the bigger question. So I think it's easy to
mm,
easy politics, I guess, is the solution, or the answer to your question.
mm,
Um, I think there are ideas out there. It's the I know the New Democrats have a platform. The UCP has a platform. I'm not sure if they've launched them or not,
mm,
but through every kind of how platforms are developed are largely through the party process anyways, right? So the if you're looking at a New Democrat, if you're thinking about voting New Democrat in your region, there a lot of what's going to guide the future, say, 4 years, is going to be outlined already in their website and the New Democrat policy position statement, right? Those are all going to kind of be there. So the things they're for, the things they're against are all kind of outlined there. Same with the UCP, and same with a Liberal, same with an Alberta
mm,
Party. They're all kind of there. So then platforms basically grab those components of what has already been voted on by the party establishment, and then put those into, okay, here it is, and packaged with a nice fancy bow and whatever. So the stuff is available to Albertans, to Canadians to go and make those decisions. But instead of pouring through like a 400-page party policy
mm,
uh, you know document, it's here's a 4-page document that's probably going to be mailed to your house from both
mm,
respective parties, and both are going to kind of give their own statements, which largely will probably attack the other and saying, this
mm,
is not the way that or these are the reasons why you should vote against them and vote for us. But I think to kind of the major point in all of this is, in my personal opinion here, is that I think what this is actually doing is driving voters away from actually voting at all. And
mm,
that's the big worry that I think we should all have, is that
mm,
you have this divisive politics constantly showing up on 6:30 Ched, or
mhm.
whatever the latest news source you listen to is.
Yeah.
And it's because I don't think most people aren't a card carrying member. Like, I'm a card carrying member of a federal conservative party, but
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, it most people aren't that way. So they're
No.
trying to make up their mind, and they're like, holy cow, like, these are just two people who are constantly angry at
Exactly.
each other. Like,
Yeah.
forget it. Like, I'm just going to go to work that day and not even worry about kind of what happens until it's over. And that's a scary part. If we get to where we're at a 30-40% voter turnout, like, and that's how many people vote in this election. It's which I think is probably a reasonable option at this point for people that they're considering, because they've been so turned off by this politics of division. So I think that's probably the biggest worry that we really should have. Regardless of who comes in, that's the biggest worry we should all have, is that if we start seeing those sorts of numbers come
Hmm.
out for voter turnout.
Yeah, and but if you're saying though that this is the easier way of doing politics is by just talking crap about the other person, but then the effect is low voter turnout, then why would you continue to do the easy way of business, right? Like, it takes courage
Yeah,
and
well,
leadership to talk about the other hard stuff, right? Like, and wouldn't that make a bigger difference and actually get your people to come out to vote? And I don't know. I might be naive at this, Matt. I have no idea, but
yeah, no, no, no. I don't think you are at all. I think that's a very fair question, and one that should be, again, this isn't an Alberta and Canada problem. This is very
Mm.
much like you look at Trump in the States. This
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
was very much a winning strategy, if you will, for campaigns for years. I'm sure you could go back in the history of Alberta politics and point at a whole bunch of examples where this was also the case. So like I remember it was the when I was in 2012 there was an ad, not your father's PC party kind of statement in a kind of it was used for and against the argument of voting progressive conservative at the time. So it's but I guess that the point making is that there are ideas out there, there are policies out
Mm.
there. It's not it's again it's not Daniel Smith that's come up with every single policy that's going to
Yeah.
there may she's a communicator of it, but
Mm.
it's the ensuring doing that kind of work and looking at where if this is an issue that's really important to me, let's use the example of health transfers. Like, okay, what
Mm.
are the New Democrats going to do with it? What are the UCP going to do with it? There's information to be found there. So,
Mm.
I guess to sum it up, the leaders aren't making it easy on you to find that
Mm.
information,
Mm-hmm.
but it's
It's there.
there, and
Yeah.
it's when the candidate comes to your door, I've door knocked our community, probably 100 times over since I was like 15 years old, and it you know the people who I think are the informed person when you come to the door are also impactful in ensuring that the candidate is then raising those
Mm.
concerns to whether it's the party brass or as part of the campaign, that those are the issues that they're hearing from their community. So I think it's a big component, and it's again it's easy politics, but it's not all that's there. So I guess it's on us now to go and do our due diligence to try to find what else is important
Yeah.
from our perspective.
For a shift to the last two questions that I ask every guest, how would you summarize for you, anyways, whether it be as a citizen or an MP or just a observer or whatever? But what are the key issues that you're looking out for in this election in terms of what matters to you?
Yeah, affordability is key. Like Alberta is really held up as like a beacon across this country right now for still being able to afford, groceries, gas, and home heating, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
houses. It's you're looking at a lot of my colleagues from, largely British Columbia and Ontario. It is, we have issues here, like for sure. Like I'm not trying to minimize those, but we also have, a tremendous, um, amount of uh, I guess ability for growth in those areas because of what maybe it's our natural resources, sure, whatever. But you can still a family can still afford a home in Terwilliger. Like it's not a family can still afford a home over in the Ramsey Heights.
Mm-hmm.
It's not where you're looking at Kitsilano, the Point Grey in Vancouver, where
Mm-hmm.
there will be no new family moving in there for
No.
probably generations now. So that I think that is a very key point. And then healthcare for me is a big deal.
Mm.
I've always thought the federal government health transfer should be fair, but also dedicated. And mental health is a key one, making sure that there's those resources put into mental health for allotted as part of the transfer for mental health. And a lump sum transfer of an amount is one thing, but ensuring that it goes to the right places, and ensuring that
Mm.
this provincial government, whoever it is, allocates those to the right places is a key that I'll be asking candidates when they knock on my door. I think I know them both my candidates reasonably well, so I'll
Mm.
probably just text them. But yeah, it's I think that's important. The two of the big important issues to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. Last two questions, if you're okay with that,
Yeah,
that I
for sure.
ask every guest. So, first question is our five for dinner question: dead or alive? Who are five people you want to have dinner with?
Shoot, I didn't watch right to the end of your last podcast. I didn't know this was coming.
Oh, sorry, Matt.
Yeah, no worries. Dead or alive. Um, Pierre Lougheed is a guy that I had the opportunity to meet, and I love him. Jim Prentice is my
Mm.
political idol. I got to serve with him before he died in a plane
Oh, I'm
crash.
sorry, Matt, for that loss. Yeah.
Yeah. Who's it? Jim Denning. I really like Jim Denning. I think a pragmatic kind of guy. Trying to like, find some interesting as like Matt Jeneroux as like a 10-year-old, like easily Jose Canseco would have been one,
Oh,
a
wow.
big
Yeah, yeah,
baseball
yeah,
fan.
yeah.
And then Tony Hawk, I was a huge skateboarder when I was in
Mm,
high school. So I think they'd all have, you'd have the political guys chatting over here, and then
yeah.
you'd probably have I don't know, maybe you'd have Jose Canseco doing steroids in the corner, and then I don't know, Tony Hawk probably have some interesting stories. So yeah.
Did you play Tony Hawk like
Oh
on
yeah, that was
PlayStation or any?
great,
Yeah.
man. That was
Yeah.
like I missed a calling, and like doing video games as like a career, man. Like I loved it, and it
Yeah.
was I'd spent hours and hours upon it. But I made this decision when I was in university. I said, you know what, like no more video games. I need to like pass my courses. I need to like this. So I shut it down then, and I really haven't picked up video games since. And
It kills
yeah, it
so much
just
time. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Last one. Hopefully this doesn't. Besides the circle of life, what do you know for sure?
Hmm. Yeah, that you're gonna have to pay your taxes as your federal member of parliament. You're gonna have to pay your taxes. Yeah,
Fair enough. Fair
yeah.
enough.
End
Um,
on a bit of a down note.
Yeah, yeah, especially since the tax deadline's looming here.
Mm,
Matt, really appreciate your time. If you ever have a local Hi Dad event, I
yeah,
will absolutely be there if
cool.
there's an opportunity to do so. I appreciate your vulnerability and just authenticity and humility throughout the conversation, and just hearing the struggles that you've been through as a dad. And I think there's a lot of value that people are going to get from that, but also just your thoughts on what's going on here in Alberta and the upcoming election. So I hope I get to meet you in person in the future, but appreciate your time for me today.
You bet. Yeah, we'll count you in for that event once we get off the ground here for sure. So no, appreciate it, Rupesh. It was a real pleasure.
Sounds good. And we'll put all of Matt's info in our show notes. And thanks everyone for watching. Like, subscribe, do all those good things. And we'll see you next time.